So with the 2021 season coming to a close here soon, we're heading into week 17, and of course next week is the playoffs. And I'm going to go more in depth in future videos or future segments, in future episodes and future podcasts and stuff like that. But I'm going to do this way. I'm going to talk about players who have exceeded my expectations for the team this year and teams who have disappointed for my expectations this year. This is not I'm not going to include rookies, Terry McLaurin, because we already, well, I take that back. I'm not going to include certain players, but I'll talk about more players more in depth later in later videos and later segments. But let's talk about players in my eyes or ears, depending if you guys would like to take it literally. Haha, blind joke there. So all right, so let's do three players who have exceeded and three players who have disappointed, or three studs and three duds. Number three stud. Let me see. Three stud. I'm gonna have to go with Cameron Curl. Now, Cameron Curl, he had to sit behind. He had to sit behind Landon Collins this year because he's a rookie and Landon Collins was the established veteran. And Landon Collins, to be honest, was really disappointing this year. He kept on getting burnt in coverage. He couldn't tackle for all he was worth. But then he played in the Dallas game, and then that's where he was actually starting to come alive. But unfortunately, he tore his Achilles, and he was lost for the year or for the rest of the season with that injury. So Cameron Curl had to step in and fill in his shoes. And Cameron Curl has actually played better than Landon Collins, in my opinion. He's a little iffy in coverage, but he's a hard hitter. He can tackle, and that's what Washington needed. Because, like I said, Landon Collins kept on getting burnt. He couldn't tackle. Cameron Curl, though, is tackling, needs to get better in his coverage, but he has been getting better, but he's been able to tackle. Number three dud was Troy Apke. And during training camp, people were calling him Trapke because he was able to, make interceptions, make tackles. He wasn't getting burnt during training camp. But translating from training camp, when you're facing your own guy versus facing, opposition, is a huge, huge difference. And he was getting burnt. People were after giving him high praise, were finally, calling him Trashkey because he was bad. And that forced DeShazier Everett to step in and play his position because DeShazier Everett was playing better. So that was, an unfortunate, that's an unfortunate dud was Troy Apke. Number two stud, in my opinion, Logan Thomas. And here's why. We actually thought that, Washington's tight end group was garbage during training camp. All of us Washington fans were clamoring for Ron Rivera to make a big signing in free agency, getting like an Eric Ebron or an Austin Hooper, but instead he decides to sign a Logan Thomas to the roster, and he was relatively still trying to get used to the position. So we actually thought that he would not work out here in DC, but he's been surprising. He has been one of the reasons why Washington actually stayed alive in that Seahawks game. Almost had over 100 yards in a few games, so he has been surprising to say the least for Washington. Number two dud, Hmm. Let me see, let me see here. Who's a dud in my opinion for this team? Well, Dustin. Well, I'm not gonna call Dustin Hopkins a dud, but he has been responsible for certain, coaching decisions that Ron Rivera and not North Turner, Scott Turner, play calling. The missed extra point against the New York Giants. And I guess Ron Rivera didn't trust Dustin Hopkins with an extra point at the end of the game, forcing him to go for two. And then, of course, the missed extra point against the Seahawks, forcing again Ron Rivera and the offense to go for two. And then, of course, the missed field goals. So I'm just going to give Dustin Hopkins the dud here because he has, not, he's responsible. I'm not going to talk about shoulda, coulda, woulda, but, Washington had a few games, winnable games that they could have won, but because of his kicking, it has been disappointing, to say the least. Number one stud, Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby has surprised me, and when I saw that signing, it was a 4 million 1 year deal. And I saw Ronald Darby play for Philadelphia, and he was getting burnt all last few years. He was injury prone. So I was like, why in the world would Ron Rivera make a signing for Ronald Darby? So my thing is, I was, Ronald Darby's probably going to be a camp body. They're going to trust in, I don't know, Greg Stroman, whoever, Fabian Moreau, Jimmy Moreland, to play the rest of, to play the season. So, but surprisingly, he made the cut, and he was a part of this 53-man roster. Has shown to be burnt a couple of times, was burnt in that Philadelphia game, but he has progressed, and, he has had solid games this year. So he is the number one stud for me in this video, or in this segment. Number one dud. Let me see here. What would be a dud in my opinion? For this team, other than Troy Apke and Dustin Hopkins. I gotta think this one through. I know that there's been a few players who, that have not, shown the potential for this team, and I've targeted many, many times in this this season because of bad play. You know what? Since it's out there, Dwayne Haskins. He is the number one dud for Washington. And you know what? I think he's gonna be the number one for this year when I do my end and review video. Dwayne Haskins, last year, it's well documented. Last year, the team, the owner, other than the ownership, Dan Snyder, no one wanted him. And the coach Jay Gruden was fired because he wasn't developing him right. And he was finally getting into a rhythm with Kevin O'Connell as his offensive coordinator. But then, Ron Rivera comes in, and, Ron Rivera was telling the media, he's a good quarterback, he's the guy. He's the guy for Washington. And, Dwayne Haskins was proving during training camp that he was the guy. He was playing better than Kyle Allen and Alex Smith. So, he was proving to be the guy. But then after 4 games, it was proven wrong. He was, he was able to lead Washington back to a win against Philadelphia, but that was it. After that, he was stinking it up. Had interceptions, had fumbles, was staring down his wide receivers. And then, we thought, he got benched. And after Alex Smith and Kyle Allen got to play. But then when Alex Smith got injured, Dwayne Haskins was given the nod, and he even stuck even more. Played terrible in the 49ers game. Played terrible in the Seahawks game in that first half, and was this close to leading a comeback, but just couldn't do it. And then of course, the stripper situation there, where he was at a party unmasked and unsafe. Called to question his immaturity, and then of course, he played terrible against the Panthers, and Washington, released him. So those are my 3 studs and duds. I know I was a little slow in thinking of them. Usually, next time, note to self, write them down. This was actually, just spur of the moment segment. I thought it would be a good way to fit this in. Next up, I'm going to be talking more about this week's game, the keys to the game for Washington versus Philadelphia, guys. So stay tuned for more.